Jesus I surrender, all to him I freely give. I will ever love and trust him, in his presence daily live. I surrender all. I surrender all to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all of me, not a part, but all of me, all the heart and soul of me, Jesus I surrender. I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. On the altar now I lay all I am today. All to Jesus I surrender, humbly at his feet I bow. Worldly pleasures all forsaken, take me, Jesus, take me now. I surrender all. I surrender all to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all to Jesus I surrender. Make I feel the sacred flame. Oh, the joy of full salvation. Glory, glory to his name. I surrender all. I surrender all to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all. I surrender all.
Our message today will be brought to us by Trey, Shirley. We'll turn the time over to him now.
Thank you. Good morning. Now, I know you didn't hear me singing, but I did have something to do with the special music. They were just going to sing I Surrender All, and that's a nice song, but Julie had already sung All of Me at the piano once, and I had thought that was going to be the song they were going to sing, so I was already kind of taken with that idea. And when they weren't going to, I started lobbying for some inclusion there. And the ending was nice, but what I really hoped that they would have done was gone, I surrender, and then all of me, and then been done. But thank you so much for including all of me in that song. I'd love to tell you about what's going on with our move and how the Lord has worked things out. But I recognize we have time constraints, and I don't know how long I'll talk, so you don't get to hear anything about that. Unless maybe you corner my wife sometime later and get her to tell it all to you. Or Christopher, see if he can remember it all. I just checked with my mom to try to confirm something. She denies it. No, she doesn't exactly deny it. She just says, I don't remember it, and I'm pretty sure if it had happened, I would have remembered it. I'm not sure about that. See, the story is, as far as I understand, when my mom and dad first got married, they were in a nice trailer. It had a front kitchen, and it was behind the property that my dad's parents owned. They had a large place in Augusta, Georgia, right on Washington Road. And they worked different shifts, and my dad was working at a hospital. And from what I understand from the story, and my dad's since passed away, so I can't confirm it with him, and it probably would just start a discussion between them anyway, because I've got two different stories. But my dad's story, which I like better than my mom's denial of it, is that he got dressed for work, and you know how a lot of those little trailers, to try to make them look a little fancier, they'd put wall sconces in the bedrooms? You know what I'm talking about? They'll have like a little metal thing that comes up and a little floret type of glass thing with a light bulb in it, and it's supposed to make it look prettier. It actually just makes you bump into it a lot. But they had this wall sconce in the bedroom, and without thinking of it, being a young married man who probably didn't know where to put his clothes, he hung his shirt on one of those sconces. No, it didn't catch fire. What happened is, right as it was getting dark, my mom, whatever she had been doing, came home, and as she entered the house, she looked down the hall, and she saw a man standing in the bedroom. Now, she turned around quietly and left and went and got someone with a gun, and they came back to determine that it was actually just one of Harry's shirts and that everything was okay. She doesn't remember that story. I wasn't there, but I still remember that story because it made quite an impression on me when I was little. So she was afraid of something that wasn't something to be afraid of. I reread, I had read it before. Do you realize that pudding pops was a huge part of the destruction of the Cold War? If anyone remembers that or is familiar with that, raise your hand. Pudding pops. Has anyone ever been to a Randall's grocery store? Raise your hand if you have. Okay. So apparently close to the Johnson Space Center was a Randall's grocery store. And Boris Yeltsin, who had just been elected into the parliament of the Soviet Union, was visiting the States, and he went on a tour of the Johnson Space Center. And that was all impressive. But then for some reason, they took him to a Randall's grocery store. And when he ran into Randall's, it did occur to him, maybe they've staged this. Maybe this grocery store is just to make me think that they actually have this much food. Because they had been in such a race, a wars race, an armament race against America, and they had been spending all of their money and energy on building up weapons, both of regular and mass destruction against America, that they couldn't keep up on a common, domestic arena. In fact, Nixon in 1959 had gone to the Soviet Union, and he and Khrushchev had looked over all these things like American refrigerators and American cake and American gadgets and even a lemon squeezer. And Khrushchev had said, this is all just bourgeois. You don't need any of this. He said, all you really need is meat and butter and milk, and that's what we're producing. He says, it's much easier just to cut a lemon, put a slice in your tea and squeeze it. Why would you have to go through all this with these gadgets? So in 1959, they had this picture, and it's called the kitchen debates, if you're wondering. In 1959, there were the kitchen debates between Nixon and Khrushchev. But in 1989, Yeltsin went through the door and he just marveled. Every aisle he turned down, there was something else to marvel at. And he started asking people with their shopping carts, what all do you buy? And they'd show him these full carts. And there were so many choices. He said, even Gorbachev doesn't have access to anything like this. And on his flight from there to Miami, he was despondent. He thought, there's no way we can keep and fight against a power that has more arms, but also more of everything. He said, if our people saw what I just saw, there'd be a revolution all over again. Right before I left on a trip to Yellowstone one year, I found a snakeskin. And in the attic of our place, and being responsible, how many of you have ever met Gogo? He was here several years ago from Indonesia. Remember Gogo? Big, happy guy. Well, he was living in our house. And so before I left for Yellowstone, I put it in one of his dresser drawers. Knowing that the problem wasn't the snakeskin, right? The problem was, if there's a snakeskin in my dresser drawer, where's the snake? And sure enough, just as I had hoped, that was exactly what happened. He freaked out, and Julie had to call him and say, yeah, I think Mr. Shirley did that to you. But you know, there is a snake. There is a snake that's keeping everyone scared. And I hope you don't mind, but I think this is probably our last Sabbath here, and I became an Adventist based on prophecy. And so if you don't mind, even though we've talked about it before, we're going to talk about prophecy today. If you do mind, let me know and I'll change it immediately. Okay, I'm going to take that as you don't mind, and we're going to talk about prophecy. How many of you knew Eldon K. Walters? He was from this division. Eldon K. Walters, he died out in Chehalia, Washington, I think, on my wife's birthday in 2016. But if you knew Eldon K. Walters, then he is the reason I'm an Adventist today. Because he put on an evangelistic series in Augusta, Georgia in 1973. And my mother got an invitation to those in the mail. Now, she was a Catholic. My middle name's Augustine. I've probably told you that before. But she was a Catholic. But she was one of these Catholics that was always curious. And so she checked into Gene Dixon and anything, just trying to figure out what was going on in the world. And then she get this colorful flyer about prophecy. And she went down to Bell Auditorium, and I started going to the meetings with her. Now, I'm 8 years old, and I know that probably many of you have been involved in evangelistic series, and a lot of the ladies put on programs for the little kids that come in. And I can tell you, I did not go to any of your programs because I was so fascinated with what was going on in the main auditorium that I sat there every night and I took in what was going on in regard to prophecy. And then my parents, they were already divorced, but there became this tug of war over the Sabbath because I had previously spent weekends with my dad. And now there was this little miniature World Council of Churches at my dad's house because he, my Catholic father, and his wife, previously Catholic but now Baptist, would converge on me every time that I went there and start arguing about why all this Adventist idea was ridiculous and that there's no way that Catholicism could turn out like prophecy indicated to Adventists, and that it was just being mean to Catholics and so on. That was their position. But as time went on, prophecy has become more clear and has shown what direction things are going, and that there will be the intolerance that I read about. And so just fairly quickly this morning, I want us to go through things that we know and recognize, and other things that maybe some of you recognize and might be a little new to some of you. And I want us to see right where we are, because there are things that we can be scared of unnecessarily. But when it comes to prophecy, I want us to be the kind of people that will wait, like Lamentations said, wait on the Lord. That doesn't mean he's behind us. That just means that he's told us some things and he wants us to trust those and not run on ahead of him. And in fact, if you've read The Great Controversy, you're aware that the Christians will think that Jesus has come, and they'll wonder why we're still so obstinate as to believe that we should still be waiting on Jesus. Are you familiar with that? And then when Jesus does appear in the clouds, the answer that we'll give is, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. Now that's where I want to be, and that's where I expect you want to be as well. So let's look really quickly. In fact, you probably won't even have to turn. Tell me, what do you see in Daniel chapter 2? Oh, now all together, what did you see? An image. I just kind of heard that. We're going to have to get better at this congregational thing. When I was in the Catholic Church, we were good at congregational responses. So you see an image, okay? And this image, tell me if I'm wrong, head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay. That's what you see, right? And you understand with me that the head, Daniel said, you are the head of Nebuchadnezzar. The head is Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece, then Rome, and then the divided kingdoms. We're all still together, right? Okay. Then in Daniel chapter 7, what do we see? Just tell me the first thing you see. A lion with wings. And that lion you also see on the walls of ancient Babylon, right? And interestingly enough, I know that you don't keep up with pop trivia, but for some reason that always sticks in my mind. And in the 80s, I was surprised to see that the Rolling Stones, a musical group from England, the Rolling Stones had an album with a lion on the front, and it was called Bridges to Babylon. So they recognized that the lion was Babylon as well. Just want you to know, secular people are paying attention too. I'm not sure where they're going with it, but they're paying attention. So you have the lion. Then you have the bear, which is California, right? Russia. The bear is Russia. I hear mumbling. Medo-Persia. That's right. It's not Russia. It's not California. It's not Yogi. It's Medo-Persia. And then the next thing you see is a leopard. Greece. And then after that, you see this nondescript, ugly beast with iron teeth, and that is Rome. And iron teeth, first it was iron legs, now it's iron teeth, and it breaks in pieces. And thank you, you're putting it up on the screen behind me. It had great iron teeth, huge iron teeth. I like that. Devouring and breaking in pieces and trampling the residue with its feet. And it had 10 horns. And we know those 10 horns, 3 of them were plucked away, and then a big mouth came up in the middle of them and started saying all kinds of wonderful things about himself. He wasn't even the beast. He was just a horn on the beast. But he thought, boy, I'm big stuff. Then we go to the next chapter, and there's a ram and a goat. And what do we see there? I mean, we see the ram and the goat, but who are they? Okay, what happened to Babylon? Went away. It was already done away, wasn't it? Because Daniel was now in Medo-Persia. Okay, so we're all together there. Daniel's an easy one, isn't it? I mean, largely. You can go through those chapters, and sometimes it even explicitly tells you exactly what they are. Now let's go to Revelation 13. And if you're anything like me, you ended up way past Revelation 13 in all kinds of basic Bible studies and concordance. But Revelation 13, and it shows us a taxidermist's dream, right? In fact, I think, if I remember right, there were some people that didn't believe the platypus was a real animal. They thought someone had sewn it together from all kinds of other animals because it was just so odd. And this is an odd one. And in this one, it says, we stood upon the sand of the sea. This is Revelation 13, verse 1, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Now, I know you don't get to it till later in the book, but I trust you. Even though there aren't as many of us here, I trust you to know, what is the sea? People. You know that from Revelation 18. So he stood up on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, out of amidst all of these people, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads, plural, his heads, the name of blasphemy, thinking that they were God. And the beast I saw, this is where the platypus comes in, he was like a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear, his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. Now, some people will call this a composite or an amalgamated beast. What does that even mean? Those are big words. Okay, there's 1 or 2 of you speaking for everyone, so you're going to have to speak up nice and loud for everyone. That's as loud as... We need a microphone, don't we? I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just a crazy beast, but if you look at it closely, you see all those beasts from Daniel, don't you? You see the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the dragon giving it its power and authority. Now, in this, in verse 3, it says, I saw one of its heads as it were wounded to death. Now, one time when I was working in physical therapy, yes, I stuttered around on those words. Sorry about that. One time when I was working in physical therapy, I was reading the book of Revelation. And one of the physical therapists I worked with, who was a deacon at his church, said, what are you reading? I said, Revelation. He says, you can't understand that. I thought, yeah, actually I can. But it says there was one of its heads wounded to death. And I think you can understand it too. What was that head that was wounded to death? The papacy in 1798, right? So here we are in Revelation 13, and we're up to kind of the time of the end. And you know, Revelation, like Daniel, kind of repeats and enlarges. So here we have this repetition, and we have this head that's wounded to death, but its deadly wound was healed. Now that's what we're especially going to look at today, when this wound was healed. And we know some things. You know that in 1929 there was a concordat signed between Mussolini and the papacy, giving them a little piece of territory that now they were in control of as a state. Again, they had state power. We know that. That was part of that healing, and it was even discussed in the papers at the time as a healing of a wound of many years. I think that was in the San Francisco Chronicle back in 1929. So it says this deadly wound was healed, and then it says all the world wondered after the beast. Now, you know that there's the word wonder and there's the word wander, right? And you might have been able to catch the difference there, wonder and wander. And in this case, it says the world wondered after the beast. Now, wandering is you're just following. And I'm not saying that they're not wandering after the beast as well, but they're wondering after the beast. They're amazed at this beast. And they worshiped the dragon that gave power to the beast, and they worshiped the beast and said, "Who is like this? Who is like this beast?" And I can tell you, my dad said, "Son, I've visited all kinds of churches, but there's nothing that feels like the Catholic Church." And he's right. There's nothing that feels like that. There's nothing that feels so holy, so incredible, with their choirs and their mass and their shaking of the incense. It's an amazing sight, and it just made him feel very close to God. And that feeling alone was part of what made him unable to look at what the Bible had to say. But we're the kind of people that are going to wait on the Lord, that are going to wait for God's word to come true, right? And so all the world wondered after the beast, and he spoke great things and blasphemies. Now, if you read a lot of the encyclicals, a lot of the things even coming out today, they seem pretty good. So what are these blasphemies? He's not saying that God isn't God, but he's kind of equating himself with God, and that's a blasphemy. That's what they accused Jesus of, was blasphemy, because he equated himself with God. But he said, kind of in Ellen White's words, she said, "I commend to you the scriptures," and he said the same thing. He said, "All of this is written about me. But these other things are written about the papacy." And we know that those are blasphemies from his mouth. And so it was given him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And then I have to turn through all of the Ellen White comments to get to the next page. And it says that there's another beast in verse 11. Another beast with two horns comes up out of the earth. Now, if the seas are people, then what would that make the earth? It'd be less populated. Came up out of the earth, he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. It doesn't cause the people to worship God in heaven. You notice that? It causes them to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Okay, so in 1929, we're all aware that there was a healing of a wound of many years. Now I want us to skip over Revelation 14. That's the three angels' message that we give at this time of the end. Come out of her, my people. Don't worship the beast in his image. Don't receive the mark and its forehead in his hand. And this people that are presenting this, it says that they are the kind that follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They're going to follow Jesus. That's what we want to be, the people that follow Jesus. But let's look at chapter 17. In chapter 17, there is an angel, and we're in the time of the judgment. Now, when did that time start? 1844. So here's an angel having one of the vials of judgment. And he says, "Come with me, I want to show you the judgment of the great whore that sits on many waters." This great whore that's amidst all of these people, with whom the kings of the earth had committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth had been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. I know you know this, but wine involves doctrine. Wine involves believing certain things, and these people have been made drunk with her doctrines. And in another place, it says I had it in my head. The wine of the yes, but that's not exactly how they say it. Cameron, can you help me? I can't think of the verse right at the moment. Yes, that's all we're going to help you with. I can't remember which verse it is right now, but it doesn't just talk about drunk with the wine of her fornication, but the wine of the wrath of her fornication. In other words, the doctrines that they've come to believe have made them angry Christians. Are you with me? These are angry Christians. These are not the ones that you know by their love. These are the ones that you know by their anger, by their wrath. That's not the group we want to be in. Okay. "And I saw this woman drunken with the blood of the saints, it says in verse 6, and I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said, "Oh, why are you marveling? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her and of the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition." How many of you speak Spanish? Okay. What does perdition mean? Lost. They're going to be lost. That's what's going to happen here. "And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names are not," I repeat, not written in the book of life. So we don't want to wonder after that beast. We don't want to be lost. We want our names written in the book of life. And so it says in verse 9, "Here is the mind which has wisdom." It's telling us, if you're wise, go ahead and look at this. Let's look at this together with a little wisdom. It says, "There 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, and there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7. Now what's interesting here is it's equating whole beasts with heads of beasts. Okay? Because it says the beast that was and is not is the 8th and is of the 7. In the previous chapter, it talked about having a head that was wounded, and it says that these heads are 7 kings, and 5 are fallen, and 1 is. Now we're going to start where they started in Daniel, and we're going to work through this, okay? 5 are fallen. There's Babylon, right? There's Medo-Persia. There's Greece. There's Rome. There's papal Rome. At the time of judgment from 1798 on, 5 were fallen, correct? Right. And 1 is. And that was atheism, which spread out throughout the world and developed what we know as the Cold War. And the papacy was really angry about that. He didn't like the one that took him down. And he wanted to get back at this. And so the papacy was constantly at odds with this atheism. And you know that there was a pope elected out of Poland, John Paul II. And John Paul II, coming from this communist country, when he became pope in 1979, do you remember he made kind of a victory tour through Poland? And it scared the Soviet Union, because the Polish people just rallied around this new pope. And then this pope said, there's a solidarity movement, there's a workers' movement starting in Poland. And he said to the Soviet Union, do not interrupt that, because if you do, I'll come back. And they didn't like that. And actually, there's all kinds of stories about this assassin, but the stories seem to point to Bulgaria, where he was trained. And this assassin went to get the pope and kill him, because he was dangerous to the Soviet Union. Does anyone not remember that? Okay. This fellow was let out of prison a few years back, but he went and attacked the Pope. He shot at him, got him once in the stomach and once in the hand, but he survived. And we had a new president at that time, Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan looked over there and he said, I want to get rid of the Soviet Union too. And even in the presidency, they called the alliance between Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II the Holy Alliance. Y'all familiar with this? Nod your head. Okay. And so the Soviet Union pushed at the king of the north, the king of the south in Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 through 45, pushed at the king of the north. And the reaction was so swift that even in the papers, the Washington Post, the New York Times, all of these copied the very language of Daniel chapter 11 in how swiftly this turned around. And the Soviet Union was brought to its knees. And I want to read you, if I've got the right page marked, what was stated in the Catholic Register in 1991. This is about a visit to the Vatican from Gorbachev. Who was Gorbachev? He was the president of the Soviet Union. This is the first time now we have the president of the Soviet Union coming to the Vatican in 1989. The first ever by a czar of atheism. Current News employed the same prophetic words, and this is from not just Current News, but from the Catholic Register. And it says, "This visit is a sign that the church has resisted, that the persecution by atheism has wounded it, but not destroyed it." That was the Catholic Register in 1991, saying that atheism wounded it, but didn't destroy it. And so it says that there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he'll continue a short space. Now, I don't know about you, but I think it's kind of thrilling that one of the aspects of Bible prophecy, one of the key markers of Bible prophecy, was fulfilled while I was alive. Because that king, that 6th king, it's still around just like these others are around, but its power is done. And now we're in the time of that 7th king that will continue a short time and then hand the power back over to the papacy. That's the time of America right now, fulfilling prophecy. And I want to read to you some of what happened in Poland, and this is from the Chicago Tribune from 1991, and just see if you recognize the same fingerprints today. This is from Warsaw. It's Reuters, I don't know how you pronounce that. It's kind of like the AP. And it says this: Poland's powerful Roman Catholic bishops, reaching for more influence, said Thursday the separation of church and state should be abolished in the former communist country. The formula separating the Catholic Church, this is quoting these bishops, the formula separating the Catholic Church from the state should be removed from the Constitution. Ending the separation enshrined in the former communist constituent would make Catholicism the state religion. Well, of course, at this point, we still have a strong hand of Greek Orthodoxy. The Church, the strongest ally of solidarity during its fight to topple communism, has increased its political influence since the trade union movement won power in 1989. It is called the present law an ally of evil. The bishops' initiatives have provoked a growing debate on the role of the church in post-communist Poland. And they said, before, the people were afraid of the party. Now they are afraid of the church. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but in Louisiana, there was just signed into law that all of the public schools have to display the 10 Commandments. That was just signed into law. And I was watching a video of Ben Carson presenting that this is a good thing. This is the way it should be. And I want to remind you and Ben Carson that when they put those 10 Commandments on the wall, and the great controversy says that when the dogmas of the church start to be a directive of the state, we will know that the Catholic power is nearly won, that the battle is almost over. And I want you to remember that when they put those 10 Commandments up, they're not thinking about your Sabbath. You are aware of that. Those 10 Commandments, when they look at the need to keep a day holy, it's the day that the larger group says is the day to keep holy. Now, I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again right now. We are aware that the churches, the nominal evangelical churches, are hemorrhaging believers. And even in their own survey, they found that they're not losing people to nightclubs and drinking and dancing. They're losing people that, in their own words, are the ones most concerned, most committed to the Word of God, most committed to their faith. These are the people that God is calling out of Babylon. And these are the people who don't yet know where to go. You know. You know where they should go. You know to be calling them out and pointing them, just as the three angels said we should be doing. Each of us in our own sphere. We don't have to get frenetic and now go rushing out to try to win someone, but each in our own sphere, as we talk to people, we can point them to Christ and say, you know, this power will continue to grow in the United States. It will continue to gain power, but we don't have to marvel at that. We need to be looking to Christ, who is in heaven, who is interceding for us, who has said, I will come again soon, who says that it will be hard to find faith on the earth, but you know his word. And I want you and I want me, I want me to be among those people that say, you know, I'm willing to wait for the Lord. It's worth it to wait for him. He will save us. And I don't have to be afraid of anything from anyone, because the very command to us is fear God and give glory to him. And in this case, it's not, I'm afraid of God. It's, I'm in awe of God. And I know he loves me, and I know my Redeemer lives, and I want to give him all of me. Thank you. In our closing song,